updates? There we go. Thank you so much. All right, excellent. So welcome again, and thank you all for being here. We are happy to have you join us today for a lighthearted webinar called Death and Taxes from ICPSR. And now I would like to give a warm welcome to our expert presenter, Dr. Lynette Holter. Dr. Holter is our Director of Instructional Resources, the Director of the National Archive of Arts and Culture, and the Director of the Consortium Social Sciences Archive. She is the real deal. Dr. Holter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. I never know quite how to live up to Anna's introductions, but hopefully you will find today's presentation a little bit lighthearted. That's what I was going for. I'm going to talk, no surprise, about data that we have on death, data that we have on taxes, and how death and tax data has been used to create some new data. And then I'll also show you really quickly how to get to restricted federal microdata on death and taxes. We only have a half an hour, and it turns out we have a lot of data on these topics. So I'm going to go kind of quickly, and don't pay attention to the fact that I just found a typo on this first slide. But when we were talking about topics for webinars, we were talking about what could we do that would be kind of fun, whatever. And so, you know, obviously death and taxes came to mind, right? We hope that sharing a little bit about the data that we have in our collection will, if nothing else, give you a way to think about job security, right? So death and taxes are inevitable, so you might as well study them. I've gone through and put lots and lots of links. These slides are probably one of the most boring sets of slides visually that I have created for a webinar in a long time. Maybe my first ones kind of looked like this, but they go against all best practices for slides. But because they will be made available to you, what you should really be interested in is all of the links that are on the slides themselves. So these will be made available, and all of the blue are links that will take you to the resource that I am mentioning. So let's get to it. I decided to do these in the order of death and then taxes, even though, you know, you do your taxes first and then you die, typically. Or maybe some people are thinking about death while they're doing their taxes. I don't know. I was joking with Anna about which I finished first, this presentation or my taxes. Thankfully, it was my taxes, but not by much. So I thought we would talk initially about sort of the standard kind of who, what, when, where of death, or the demography of death. ICPSR actually has a lot of resources that can be used to study this, both in the present time and historically. So we've got a data set that includes cross-national statistics on the causes of death. I wanted to mention this LifeM Ohio Causes of Death. It's actually a linkage project. It's not a data set in and of itself. And we're going to pretend that I spelled intergenerational correctly in the link underneath it. But this is a project to link death data with some of the data that Martha Bailey and her colleagues have put together using census records and other publicly available databases, linking people across time. And so it creates an excellent source of data for studying intergenerational mobility, marriage and fertility patterns, things like that. And this LifeM Ohio Causes of Death links death data from Ohio to that incredibly huge and useful database. So I wanted to point that out, even though it's not a typical study in the ICPSR sense. We also have a lot of government data on death, like the mortality detail files, the multiple causes of death series. Those we tend to have older data on, and so I've tried to give the year range where applicable. For a while, we weren't grabbing government data because it was being made available in easily accessible ways through the agencies that were collecting it. Now you'll probably see some more of that government data coming back into ICPSR's collection. But that's if you're wondering why some of these are older, like the mortality detail file series, that's why. And I should say that most of the studies listed on this slide use a common set of codes to identify the causes of death. And they come from the Manual of International Statistical Classification of Diseases, Injury, and Causes of Death. And so if you're looking for something that allows you to do standardized research across time or across location, these data sets have those codes in them. I noted that some of the National Health Interview series include years that have files that include multiple causes of death and the dates of death. There's also a great study of mortality in Baltimore, Boston, New Orleans, New York City, and Philadelphia in the late 19th and early 20th century. And then I wanted to just give a shout out to the National Archive of Computerized Data on Aging, because there's a lot of data on health and aging into death and causes of death. And so that sort of follows that demography trajectory of studying death. Now, if you're like me, demography is nice, but I want a little bit more. I want something a little bit more interesting. I want to put people behind the numbers. And so I thought about sharing some data sets that we have that look at deaths among specific populations. So obviously we've got quite a bit of data about COVID-19 and different experiences in nursing homes and in jails and among the incarcerated in general. This is a nice study because it's longitudinal, just during the time of COVID, but it also contains two separate samples so that you can look at people who are in high-risk populations as well as a general population, and you can kind of compare their experiences. And it's not only death, but it also looks at their attitudes about the healthcare system, their experiences with the healthcare system, the experiences of friends and family members who may have had COVID, things like that. So I broadened the definition of death a little bit to include this one, but it does include data about people who died of COVID. We also have data from what used to be called Deaths in Custody Reporting Program. It's now called Mortality in Correctional Institutions. We've got a series of data, again, ranging from about 2000 to 2019. So if you're interested in looking at people's well-being and death in correctional facilities, many of these data sets are restricted, so you'll have to apply to access them, but a great source of data for studying that. We also have data from the Puerto Rican Elder Health Conditions Project series, and one of them includes, well, actually the data are longitudinal. Again, when you're looking at studying things like causes of death, longitudinal data is the ideal. It's what allows you to make those inferences about causation. So these follow individuals from 2002 to 2022, and they started with Puerto Rican residents who were aged 60 or older. There's about just over 4,000 individuals in the primary sample, and they include about just under 2,000 spouses of those individuals, most of whom are also over age 60. So you can follow them over time and get great detailed information about the health conditions that they have that may have precipitated their death. Interestingly, I always love doing these sort of deep dives into our collection because I find cool stuff I didn't know we had. So we actually have a United States Census of Mortality, and if you look at the dates, you're like, wow, that's kind of old and specific. It's actually part of a Civil War veterans series, and I linked to the whole series here. But it looks at the effects of both the environment as well as infectious disease and other working conditions, things like that, on the overall aggregate economic and health patterns, studying a sample of men in the Union Army during the Civil War. So there are probably, I think, about 5 different studies in that series. If you're interested in historical data, it's a great contextual data set that brings lots of pieces together. I also linked here that there are many open ICPSR or self-published projects related to death. And many of those are related to either specific time periods or to subpopulations. So if you're looking for a population that I didn't grab and put here, or a specific time period, you might check out those as well. Again, they're not going to be in the uniform sort of structure of ICPSR data because they're not what we call curated. They're self-published. So what the individuals deposit is what you get. But there are lots and lots of studies to increase the chance that you'll find something that you can use. I thought it would be interesting to talk about what happens after death, right? So only me, right? So we actually have a couple data sets about what happens in terms of figuring out how death occurred. So for, again, these are particularly for populations in either incarcerated populations or individuals who might be in elder care facilities, things like that. So we've got an autopsy analysis of deaths in Los Angeles County. And then we also, this coroner investigation of suspicious elder deaths is interesting because it looks at the decision-making processes of the coroners or the medical examiners who are charged with investigating deaths of elder individuals where their death seems like it might be suspicious. And it uses data from 3 coroner medical examiner offices, or CME offices. And then finally, we have a study about the utility of whole body CT imaging in postmortem detection of elder abuse and neglect. Again, that same sort of specific population. I said that this wouldn't be all sort of morbid. So I wanted to include some lighter hearted, if you can call death, any data about death lighter hearted. But we have a really interesting study on the effects of the physician aid in dying law that was enacted in Vermont in 2013. And so this is a qualitative study, so a little bit different than the data that you might expect to find at ICPSR. But it includes both observations in settings where conversations about death might be occurring, and then also interviews with a wide range of individuals sort of related to the topic of aid in dying. So terminally ill patients themselves, the survivors of patients who have chosen to die this way, healthcare providers and the effect that it has on them. Also, people like activists were interviewed. So lots of in-depth information about a set of laws that is becoming more and more widely talked about. We also have a study from right here in Detroit. It's one of each year of the Detroit area study often had its own sort of subtopic or subject area that it was focused on. And in 1999, they looked at life and death decision-making. And this looks not only at the conversations that respondents had with their family members or their healthcare providers about end of life. It also includes a series of questions about different circumstances. When might they consider assisted suicide, how might they consider assisted suicide? And then it also includes other data that are about death in specific circumstances. So abortion and the death penalty, um, among others. And then just for fun, we have variables. So maybe not whole studies about topics like belief in life after death, or belief in ghosts, but we do have data about um, people's attitudes about these things. So there's a little screenshot. You can see that well, you probably can't see in the screenshot, but I'll tell you that of the people who got the question about whether they have ever personally seen or believed themselves to be in the presence of a ghost, of the people who answered that question, it was about 50-50 said yes and no. So a lot higher than I was expecting. This is just a quick comparison, because those of you who have heard me speak before know that I love our social science variables database. It has some flaws, but oh great, I am getting a thing that's saying my computer needs to be updated. We're just going to pause that and hope that we can go on with this presentation. Anyway, this is an example of using our social science variables database to look at whether people believe in life after death across a couple different populations. So the only things that fit on the slide were answers from the Japanese General Social Survey, the Korean General Social Survey, and the US General Social Survey. This is a question that gets asked routinely on that. But the one that was underneath that, and I like these because they're all kind of parallel survey instruments. But underneath that was a question from a survey of Black Americans. And so just different perspectives. And it's interesting to look at the frequencies and see sort of where is there, how do people answer when they're given strictly yes, no versus a yes, definitely, maybe, maybe not, definitely not kind of scale, as well as the certainty among people in different countries. So again, if you're teaching and looking for a way to use the social sciences variables database, that's a good way to do it. There were a couple studies that kept coming up in my searches that I thought just should get kudos just for great titles. These happen to be replication data, so I can't speak for the quality of the data, but data and code for ghosting the tax authorities, fake firms, and tax fraud. I thought that was a nice segue between death and taxes. And then the tax man cometh, consumer spending and tax payments. So I figure if you're going to go to the trouble of making an interesting title, I should at least recognize it. Tax data. It turns out we have quite a bit of tax data too. Lots of historical data. So really interesting. The first one, Massachusetts tax valuation records from 1771, followed about 38,000 individuals in 152 towns in Massachusetts and kind of looked at the value of their property, their consumer habits, things like that. And I think I'm mixing two of these together. That's why I paused. The 9 Chester County, Pennsylvania tax lists goes even further back. And that one is longitudinal or repeated cross section from 1693 to 1799. And it looks at the market value of property, but also the value and number of slaves and servants that the households included. This wealth, household expenditure, and consumer goods in pre-industrial England and America goes back to 1550 through 1800. And it's actually 4 surveys that are repeated over time of households in England that then some of them moved to the US, which wasn't the US when they moved there in most cases. But it includes survey data about personal wealth, household production, possession of consumer durables and longer term products. One of the surveys also includes information about dietary habits. And then they look at wills to try to study the intergenerational transfer of goods and wealth. So really detailed records for an early time in American history. And then sources and uses of funds in state and local government, again, from that 1790 to 1915 time period. So good for studying historical political behavior and the results of taxes in those governments. And I knew that I was going to struggle. Now, what is it? Sorry, getting another blink about my computer while I'm trying to advance slides. I knew I was going to have trouble keeping to a half an hour, so I'm going to keep going through these pretty quickly. We have some data sets about how governments are financed, both internationally. So the first data set has 40 countries. It's really 22 countries, and the rest are areas from 1870 to 2001. And then financing the state looks at central governments in Europe and Americas, and it's all countries that have a population of over 1 million in Europe and the Americas, and some other countries like Australia and Japan are included as well. And these look at both direct, so it looks at property taxes, income taxes, and then it also includes taxes like excise taxes and consumption taxes and customs, sort of how they're collected, how much they fund the central government revenues, and how that revenue is used. And then a state tax revolt data set follows all 50 states over a 30-year time period and looks at the funding sources and the expenditures of the different states, again, collected from publicly available sources. As states are incorporating taxes on different products, we need to see how those taxes affect or don't affect consumer behavior. And so I included one of those studies here, the multi-city study of the impact of taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages, or what we call the soda tax. And it's based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Oakland, California. It uses store observation data for pricing of the sugar-sweetened beverages. It looks at purchasing behavior from surveys of individuals within those stores. And then there are household surveys that look at beverage consumption. And so they're kind of looking at whether those taxes are doing anything to reduce the reliance on sugar-sweetened beverages. And we have replication data for a variety of tax incentives. I didn't put a link here, but if you're interested in a particular tax incentive, definitely do a search and see what might come up. Let's see. And then we have data that actually stems from the use of death data, tax data, other municipal records, church records, things like that, to create sort of life histories or historical studies of different groups of people. So the 4 generations, population, land, and family in colonial Andover follows 28 of the original settler families in Andover, and follows them for 3 generations after that initial generation. So 4 generations total, to kind of look at land use and transfer across time, family and fertility patterns, things like that. The families of Newtown, New York, also historical data, started with 202 families that included over 1,000 children and kind of looked at their life experiences across time. Same kind of thing for families in Massachusetts. Again, same sort of time period. Um, and then population migration between counties based on individual tax returns. This is more recent data, 1982 to 83, but it looks at how individuals' tax records document their sort of living situation and movement across different counties in the US. And I wanted to point out, if you're interested in data, specifically restricted data from the IRS Statistics of Income Division or any of the National Center for Health Statistics, mortality data, things like that, that are restricted, you can find them on researchdata.gov. And this is researchdata.gov.org. And this is the image is hyperlinked. And I just wanted to note one thing, except it's not doing it. Anyway, I had a little animation that said that the IRS is actually unique among the institutions in that they restrict their the period that you can apply to access their restricted data to the month of June. So June 1st through June 30th, 2025 is the next window that you can use to apply for data from the IRS. Oh, there it is. And with that, I will turn it over. I think I've gone over by a minute. I'll turn it over to Anna, and she can talk about some additional resources and things coming up at ICPSR.
Thank you so much. That was phenomenal. I was madly scribbling notes. I did not know about any of that ghost data, so that was fascinating. If you could advance a slide for me, we will just continue for a quick minute for anyone who can stay a little bit longer. We just wanted to let you know about a few of the resources that are available from ICPSR. One is our YouTube channel. You may or may not know we have about 500 videos, including soon this one, that are up on our YouTube channel. Those are free and available for anyone who is interested, and they do include lots of training. One of my favorites is our No Stupid Questions series, which is geared towards students who may be interested in data but afraid to ask some of the simple questions. There are no stupid questions, and we can help answer those. And you can find that YouTube channel at youtube.com/ICPSR. Thanks so much. We are also on social media. Please follow us there. You can find us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Threads, X, Instagram, LinkedIn. This is an example of what you might find on our social media. Every week we look at current events and look at how someone came to the headline that they came to based on the data. And you can find that in our bibliography. And next, please stay in touch. You can connect with us again on social media or sign up for any of our email lists. ICPSR Announce is our main email list for our main newsletter. And you can use that QR code right there to sign up. So I'm just going to give you a quick moment to pull out your camera on your phone and go ahead and sign up there. And you will get a once a month email that is called the ICPSR Bulletin. It will have information like upcoming webinars, scholarships, etc. You'll also find out about new data, our incredible ICPSR summer program, and lots more. And then finally, we have a few things coming up at ICPSR and beyond. April 24th, we will have a webinar on gateway projects for environmental exposure data in aging research. On April 28th, we have our Data Savvy Teaching office hours. And then on April 29th, there is a Disappearing Federal Data Implications and Preservation Efforts event. So with that, thank you all so much for being here. We're going to put up one more slide that has our contact information. Please feel free to reach out. We're sorry we didn't get to answer those questions other than the ones that came in through chat. But if you did have any additional questions, please reach out to us here or give us a call. We would love to hear from you. Thank you again so much to Dr. Holter for being here. This 30 minutes went so fast. The recording again of today's webinar will be available, and it will be on our ICPSR YouTube channel within about 48 hours, and everyone who participated today will receive that recording via email. Thank you all again so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.